This is not a campaign issue we're talking about. This is a governance issue.
And I know that Democrats, even in some in New York or in really blue states, have called for Biden to drop out of the race. But I saw Biden sent out a letter to Democrats on Monday saying he's not going to do that. And he said that in the second debate in September, he's going to attack Trump. So do you think he's capable of that, or are we just going to see like a repeat of what happened last month?
I think Biden wants to stay as president, wants to be reelected. Whatever doubts he has, he's not going to show in public. He's basically saying, I'm going to hold my breath until I turn blue, and I'm going to be the candidate. Things are moving at a fairly rapid rate. Just a few hours before we've spoken here, Nancy Pelosi went on MSNBC and basically said to the president, think again. I think this is very much up in the air, and I don't know how it will come out, but I don't think it's over. I'd say two things further. Number one, this is not a campaign issue we're talking about. This is a governance issue. And the president read a speech from a teleprompter at the opening of the NATO 75th anniversary celebration on Tuesday night in Washington. I don't think it was the world's greatest piece of oratory, but at least he read the lines correctly. But are we going to do this every time he appears in public for the next 4 months? It wasn't just one bad night, because a lot of people believed it confirmed what they thought Biden's condition was when they saw it. And in the 2 weeks since the presidential debate, Biden's mental acuity has been the dominant subject of the room for 2 straight weeks. And every time you're explaining that your candidate is not mentally defective, this is not a good thing for the campaign. So the cumulative impact on Biden is already enormous. And his supporters have to believe that in the next 4 months, it won't happen again. And you should ask them, how confident are you that it won't happen again?
Yeah. And I also saw a recent poll that said if another younger and more, enthusiastic Democrat candidate was going up against Trump, that they would likely win. And that was just one poll. But do you think that another Democratic candidate could beat Trump if it wasn't Biden?
Yeah, I think almost anybody under 70 on the Democratic side could beat Biden. Polls had shown 70% plus of the American people did not want a rematch of 2020. There are a lot of people that can't stand either Trump or Biden. Most of them will grit their teeth and vote for one or the other. But if they had anybody else as an option, that person would have a real advantage. If you look back at the 1960 campaign, when Eisenhower had 2 heart attacks, but he was still younger than both Trump and Biden when he left the presidency in 1961. What was the Democratic response to an aging Dwight Eisenhower, who, by the way, had commanded the Allied armies to victory at D-Day and in Europe? He wasn't a real estate dealer. He had basically won World War II in Europe. What was the Democratic response to an aging Ike Eisenhower? They had John Kennedy, the second youngest person ever elected president, saying he was going to bring vigor back to the White House. And they're talking about Joe Biden. I mean, look at history.
Yeah. And obviously both Biden and Trump are, Biden's 81, Trump is 78. People are worried about both of their ages. But if it does come down to them, which it likely will, who's a bigger threat to the U.S. in terms of where their minds are at?
Look, neither one of them is fit to be president. And my view is that comparing them is, in arms control, we call it looking at incommensurables. They're things that can't be judged by the same metric. They're unfit for the job for different reasons. And it's a sad commentary on America that we're just talking about who may be the least qualified or the least unqualified to do the job. That's not what we should be looking for in elections.
Yeah. And going back to Biden, staying in the race, I know he said he will, but do you think Biden will drop out of the race before the Democratic National Convention in August? Do you think his aides are going to tell him to do that, or do you think he's going to stay in?
Look, he's a stubborn guy. He always has been. I've known him for a long time. I dealt with him in 1987 when he dropped out for having plagiarized from a speech by British Labour Party leader Neil Kinnock. It was in the middle of the Bork confirmation hearings. I was at the Justice Department at the time. So he's been at this now for almost 40 years, and he's in the White House. He's not going to give it up easily. But I also don't think he wants to be disgraced in history. And we'll see. New information is coming in. I have to say, the Republican Party is justifiably criticized for the influence Trump has had. We've become a kind of cult of personality. Republicans are afraid to stand up to him. But honestly, if the Democrats are afraid to stand up to Biden on this point, they've become a cult of personality too.
Yeah. And if Biden does step down, do you think Kamala Harris would replace him? Or I saw a poll that Hillary Clinton was actually polling really well among there. So what do you think of that?
Yeah, another youth candidate. Look, I think what people want is a change. And I think people who can't stand Trump but can't bring themselves to vote for Biden would look for somebody that they could say, I think the country would be in safe hands for the next 4 years, and we'll get past the Trump phenomenon. Then we'll fight it out again. The Democrats move to the left, Trump will win. Biden campaigned as a pair of safe hands, but he didn't govern as a pair of safe hands, which is one reason he's in trouble. I think the Democrats ought to have some kind of open process to let some of their governors, some of their senators debate and try and present in a abbreviated fashion what would be a longer campaign. They're in a bad position, but they let themselves get into this position. And now they've got to figure a way out of it. And if they just want to go off the cliff like lemmings, I'd say serves them right, except it's going to give us Donald Trump if they do.
And I also saw that Putin has said he would almost prefer Biden as president just because he's been doing it for a while. He's kind of predictable. Do you think that's true? And do you think that if Biden does stay in the White House, like how much of the decision making is he actually doing, or would it be Kamala Harris?
Well, I think from Putin's point of view, in Russian, they call that desinformation, disinformation. He's saying he'd prefer Biden when he obviously prefers Trump. So that allows Trump to say, see, he said he supports my opponent. Why do people keep saying he supports me? I don't know who's making decisions in the Biden White House. I don't think you can really tell from the outside. I have to say the Biden administration has been pretty good at containing leaks, not just comparing it to the Trump administration, which is one of the leakiest in history, but they've run a pretty tight ship. I think in part because they fear if leaks really got going, you would see how little the president really is involved. But it's the time and attention of the president are the most important asset that any presidency has. And when the president's not on duty 24/7, it's a real problem.
And I did want to ask about Obama. I think I read something in New York Magazine saying that Obama's very worried about the Biden campaign. What do you think the significance of that is in terms of Democrats kind of making Biden step aside?
I think Obama's been worried about the campaign for a long time, and I think a lot of other Democrats have as well. I don't understand why they've allowed it to get to this point. But this is a dilemma of their own making, and they're in a very difficult situation right now. They didn't have to be in this situation. They could have gone to Biden earlier and had a conversation with him. In British politics, when a prime minister or political leader is in trouble, they have what they call the men in gray suits come into the guy's office and say, "Prime Minister, it's time for you to leave." And we can see now there aren't any men in gray suits in the Democratic Party, and that's why they're in a bad place.